What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? Turns out the Detroit Lions aren't the only dominant team in the NFC. The Philadelphia Eagles have thrown their hat in the ring, and Saquon Barkley, can anyone say 2,000, has a massive night. Eclipsed 250 yards, couple touchdowns. And I think it's safe to say, with the Commanders falling apart, that unofficially the Eagles have won their second division championship in 3 years and are back on top of the division and look poised to be a serious contender when it comes to the NFC. So we will dive into that game. Rough night for the Rams. The line of scrimmage on offense, I mean, you talk about just getting worked. Hopefully Brandon Graham is okay. He left the game late with an elbow injury, but Brandon Graham looked about 28 years old. And the rest of the guys just worked him at the line of scrimmage. So we will dive into this game. Something draft-wise from this game as well. And then we'll fly around the league. I talked to Colin earlier today, so you can go check that out. So we talked a lot about, and I'll try to hit on some things that we didn't dive in depth on. But that will be the plan. So a lot of football talk coming up. But first, can I tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time? SoFi tonight. Been there one time. It's incredible. I highly recommend anyone who ever gets the opportunity to go to SoFi. The place is sweet. So modern, so just, it's unlike any venue I've ever been to. So if you ever get a chance to go to a concert, to a game there, just download the Game Time app, get a pair of tickets, concerts, comedy shows. I was playing golf with a buddy on Friday that said he was going to a comedy show. I'm like, I need to do that, and I need to use Game Time. Obviously, college games, pro games, any sport, you name it, they got you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code John for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. You know, it's funny. Early on in the season, whenever you get new coordinators, right? Part of it is the world we live in, and I'm guilty of this. Our expectations are really high with good and bad teams, but we don't leave you much room to figure things out. We just come in and criticize or come in and anoint. And I think the Eagles are a good example of it took them a little time to figure things out with the offensive and the defensive coordinator. But at the right time of the season, not only are they clicking, but clearly their two hires look excellent. And their team looks fantastic. That was an ass kicking. They worked them. And I think it really shines a light on a couple things. Philosophically, and I saw it when I worked there, and they have never flinched from this the whole time Howie Roseman has ran the operation. And it goes back through Andy Reid through the late 90s up through the 2000s. The line of scrimmage. That is where you win. It doesn't mean you can't get aggressive and make a huge trade for A.J. Brown or spend money on Saquon or draft a corner really high. But what separates you in the NFL, just like in college football, is the offensive line and the defensive line. And you look at this team as the season is gone, Jalen Carter is a fucking menace. He is an unstoppable force. Brandon Graham, even at his age, is still an excellent player. What round did they draft Brandon Graham in? The first. Jalen Carter, the first. Nolan Smith, high in the second. Nakobe Dean, the third. Like, they invest so much in their front seven and anyone that impacts the quarterback, and they have forever. And offensive line, how many teams could lose Jason Kelce? One of the greatest players in the history of the franchise, and not really skip a beat. Well, why is that possible? Because they're always investing in the offensive line. When Jason Peters left, it's like, how do you replace a Hall of Fame tackle? Well, we got this guy in the 7th round that we've molded in to be a 10-year starter at left tackle. And I was thinking about this tonight as Saquon Barkley and one of the offensive linemen are just dominating Mekhi Becton. One man's trash is another man's treasure. But I think when you look, and I admire these type people just in general because it's so easy when everyone's hanging a left to follow them and hang a left. I would say pretty consistently, especially in business, when everyone's hanging a left, that's usually when people turn right. Right? How often have you heard the last 15 years? God, I wish I would have bought a house in 2009, 2010, 2011. I've heard that from a million people. I didn't have any money then, so it wasn't even an option. But how many older people or people in position that like, God, I didn't pull the trigger. I waited a little bit and I spent a lot more. Or God, I wish I would have bought stocks in 2022 when everything looked like it was falling off a cliff. It's like, gotta run. Everything's going down. Well, successful people usually do because they don't follow conventional wisdom. They don't follow the herd. And I think Howie is a good example. And honestly, the rest of the NFC falls under this as well. Running backs, they're dead. Who wants to run? The Giants, we're getting rid of you, Saquon. We don't even want you. We'll take you. How about $27 million guaranteed? Well, who do you have to beat in your conference? Well, last year, the 49ers were in the Super Bowl with Christian McCaffrey, who they traded a second, a third, and a fourth round pick. The Detroit Lions, who are currently the best team in the NFL and had a lead on the 49ers last year in the second half in the NFC Championship game, not only signed David Montgomery as a free agent, extended him, and drafted a running back in the first round in Jamar Gibbs. The Green Bay Packers, who are going to the playoffs for whatever, 20th time in 25 years, got rid of Aaron Jones, who they drafted and paid, who was on their team for a long time, to pay Josh Jacobs, who was a first-round pick. And then they no longer wanted Aaron Jones. The Minnesota Vikings, who happened to be 9-2, immediately picked him up, and he's their starting running back. So basically all the teams in Atlanta, who is going to make the playoffs because their division sucks, one of their best players is Bijan Robinson, who they drafted in the top 10. So all I hear is how running backs are done, devalued, and no one wants them. Well, the good teams view value. And all the good teams in the NFC have invested in that position. And Saquon, who wasted away on an awful team with an awful offensive line, clearly that team had given up on him and they didn't want him. And listen, I don't blame them. You had to move on. It didn't make that much sense. And I saw someone say this on Elon's app, X, formerly known as Twitter. The Giants take a lot of shit, but I think we all agree that people, it didn't make that much sense anymore. What about all the other teams that could have had Saquon Barkley, that were paying guards $18 million or paying fringe corners $15 million a year? Why were the Eagles of, 15 teams could have used the guy? They paid him $27 million guaranteed. Mekhi Becton is also a good example. The Jets, total failure, total bust. One of the picks where Joe Douglas screwed up. The Eagles looked at him and went, you know what? We think he could be a guard. And guess what? He's their starting right guard for clearly one of the most explosive offenses in the league and clearly one of, if not, the best running game in the NFL. Why do good teams do things that shitty teams go, we don't want you, we don't need you, you don't work here? The good teams in football, just like the good teams all around team sports, have been taking players that were either undervalued, overlooked, thrown to the trash by bad teams all of my life, and using those guys to the best of their abilities to win on that team. It's like clockwork. Happens all the time. I said it at the beginning of the season. I said, guys, one, I picked the Eagles to win the division just because there's just too much talent. Now, I thought the Cowboys would be better. I didn't think Washington would have started this good. but I thought the Eagles were going to win the division on talent alone. And I said, you would have to be high on some really good stuff to go, if Saquon's healthy behind this offensive line with a quarterback who is a running threat, that he's not going to have a good year. Not, I never would have envisioned him being the MVP potentially of the NFL, but that's what he is. And the reason you pay position coaches a ton of money when they're good is because they can take a guy that everyone, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this too, of making fun of a guy like Mekhi Becton. He's overweight. He's always injured. What a waste of a pick. He sucks. And they go, wait, Howie, how much would we have to pay to get that guy? We could probably get him for under $5 million. I don't know, a couple $1,000,000. I think he can be a guard. A guard? He's been a tackle his whole NFL career. I think we can move him to guard. Okay, let's do it. Now we're in the middle of November and Mekhi Becton is fucking road grading for them with their other good offensive line as Saquon runs for 255 yards on Sunday Night Football against what I thought coming in tonight was a really, really good defense. Turns out, I still think they're probably a good defense, but relative to that offense, it's a completely different level. And the Eagles right now, with Fangio, who clearly has that group playing at a really high level. Honestly, this game wouldn't have been that close if Darius Slay hadn't gotten injured and they had to put in Rodgers, number 34. And like any good coach and any good scheme and any good offense, they attacked him over and over and over again like he was me or you. But even that wasn't enough to overcome the talent discrepancy in this game. I think the Rams are pretty good. Now, they're 5-6, like the 49ers 5-6. I'd say they are a little more bullish 5-6, but it's probably going to be tough. If I was a betting man right now, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. But the gap tonight between those two teams was pretty wide. And I think we have to acknowledge, like, the Lions have been incredible. They have won every way humanly possible. They've won in multiple blowouts where they scored 52 points. They have won the day like, yeah, today's going to be ugly. There aren't going to be many points on the board. For a large portion of the game, it's going to be 14-6. But it's going to feel like we're a fucking anaconda around your neck, choking your ass out. And that's what good teams do. They can win like when we're on, it's going to be ugly. But hey, you want to muck up this game? You want to win in the fucking mud? You want to win an ugly game? Let's do it. Buckle up. And that's what the Lions did. The Eagles, like, I think one thing we all questioned, we knew the individual talents. How would it all come together? They're showing some of that. And I think of all the teams, they have the most talent to take them out. Now we'll see how that division shakes out. I mean, Minnesota's 9-2, and the Packers, I mean, the Niners were undermanned today, but they beat the shit out of them. But I think right now, clearly, the Eagles are the second best team, and they still play the Ravens. In a couple weeks, they play the Steelers, so they still get some games. The problem for them is their last 3 weeks are going to be against the Cowboys, the Commanders, and the Giants. I might be out of order there. I know the Giants is their last game. So they could just be killing these teams, which is a good thing, in the sense of you're getting wins, but like playing your best football against better teams going into the playoffs. I think you would probably like moving maybe the Steelers, the Ravens game to like second of the last, like week 16, week 17. But it's looking pretty good for them. And this is a muscle flex year because a lot of people thought I was crazy. Everyone's writing this team off. And listen, we don't even love their head coach. But this is what the Eagles deserve credit for. They are willing to spend a lot of money and invest into a lot of different people. Not just a running back, but coordinators. Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, I don't have their contracts, but like I know some people that kind of do, and it ain't cheap. Vic Fangio, most people think, is the highest paid defensive coordinator in the NFL. Kellen Moore ain't making $1 million. I don't know if he's making 5, but I know he's probably making 3 or 4. So combined, they pay those guys a shitload of money. So it's like, yeah, our head coach has some limitations, He's not going to be able to call offense. He's going to be more of a motivational guy, and people are going to make fun of him. Some's going to be well deserved, but we will overcome that. What's it cost to bring Vic out of Miami? Who's the best offensive coordinator available that we think is going to have the best chance to work with Jalen and our offensive personnel? Well, what's it going to cost? Because some teams go, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, too many years, too much money. It's like we see it happen all the time. We saw it happen with the Bears. We saw it happen with the Raiders. The Eagles go, here's a blank check. Let's fucking roll. And it's working. And now they look poised to be a serious contender. And on the flip side, the Rams, you know, I thought once everyone came back, they would be a major, major problem, but something just feels off. I wrote it down. Something just feels off, right? They're not like a disaster, but you watch them play, you're like, I don't know. And maybe it's just the offensive line cohesion. They've gotten some guys back off injury. It hasn't looked right. Stafford was getting destroyed tonight. I mean, listen, I have a ton of respect for there are only so many human beings that could even attempt to play NFL tackle. I don't think the casual fan realizes most left and right tackles in college football don't have a snowball's chance in hell to play in the NFL. To play in the NFL. These guys are starting Division I tackles. And think about it. However many teams there are. There's 18 teams in the Big Ten. There's like 16 teams in the SEC. I mean, do the math. The Big 12 and the ACC. I'm talking those conferences. Most of their tackles will never play in the NFL. Honestly, most of them won't even make it to training camp if they get like tryout positions. So to get the opportunity to have the size, the strength, it's hard. Tonight, there were moments early in the game when Brandon Graham was going untouched. You went, is Stafford safe? Is Stafford safe? I mean, he got hit one time, and this is what quarterbacks make a lot of money. They get a ton of publicity. They're the most famous players in the most popular league. You get hit by guys that are 250 to 350 pounds sometimes that do not get touched, either coming around the corner or coming up the middle, while your eyes are on a wide receiver looking down the field. And that guy hits you full speed. When Brandon Graham hit Stafford tonight full speed, it made me think like, I don't think the casual fan, and sometimes I fall into this too when I'm just sitting there watching game on TV, respects how fucking hard that guy just got hit. How much that hurt getting slammed into the ground. Hell, there was a play tonight, and listen, we all make fun of it. The soft of the league, the league rules, and a lot of that is true relative to the way the league used to be officiated. There was a play today when Saquon landed into the line of scrimmage, and he got hit by about 3 people and kind of picked up and driven back. And I don't know if he got the wind knocked out of him. I don't know if he got blasted in the nuts, but he was down for a while. The trainers came out, and even Sirianni walked out there, and you could tell the trainers, like, he's okay. He just got, he just needs a minute. And we just go, yeah, he's going to be okay. You just get a breather and come back in. It's like this game is still really, really violent. And the speed of which these guys are moving has never been faster on the aggregate. Obviously, there have always been fast guys. I'm not saying like Lawrence Taylor or Reggie White didn't move fast, but on the aggregate, top to bottom. And like, here's the thing. There are 2 guys in this game that were drafted number 19 and 22. Jared Verse from Florida State went to the Rams at 19. Wasn't even the first defensive lineman off the board. There were several ahead of him. And Quinyon Mitchell, the corner for the Eagles, went pick 22. Both those 2 players, if you redid the draft, and here's the thing. I would take, if you told me you can get a star corner or a star wide receiver, I would take the star corner over the star wide receiver in a draft high because I can get wide receivers later in the draft. It is more difficult to find star corners in the 3rd or the 4th round, where every year we see starting wide receivers come from that area. Not saying you can't, but the stats are on your side that if you're going to get a corner or a pass rusher, you are more inclined to do that. And we see the Giants and we see the Cardinals. Like, If the Arizona Cardinals could do it over, Marvin Harrison is a fantastic player. I would rather have Jared Verse at pick 4. Hell, I'd rather have Quinyon Mitchell at pick 4 and take a wide receiver in the second round. And I actually think they had 2 picks because they had the Texans pick from the previous year when they traded up for Will Anderson. Obviously, the Atlanta Falcons at pick 8 would rather have either one of those guys, but specifically Jared Verse. And I think we're going to look back and those guys are already clearly 2 of the best players from this entire draft, let alone the first round. And the Rams, their defensive line, love it. I mean, Verse, Fisk, they are a very, very physical team. And tonight they got leaned on a little bit because the Eagles are too. And that's why you build your team that way. And you look at the Rams like, and this is a 49er issue as well, your offensive line is just not good enough. And when your offensive line is not good enough and you're forced into throwing situations, whether you got Purdy, whether you got Matt Stafford, whether you got fucking Michael Vick, the guy's going to be under duress and run around for his life. And obviously Stafford is not exactly Hurts or Vick or Lamar Jackson, like the pocket quarterback. And tonight, he didn't really stand a chance. And there comes to a point like sometimes you're calling these plays like it's just kind of on the player. There's nothing you can really do if your guard or center is getting spun like a dreidel. And he can barely touch the guy. And they're immediately screaming, "Look out! Watch out! My guy's coming!" And then he's just getting crushed. And that was the big question mark early this season with the Eagles. It's like, their pass rush. What the hell's wrong with their pass rush? They've invested all this in their pass rush. And now it's kicking ass and taking names. So dominant win by Philly. Fun night just from if you like personnel and the draft, just kind of watching this team, how they were built. And what a season from Saquon. Really pretty special. It's if you just love great players, I say it all the time. Like, you hear sometimes people argue, like, don't we want to see Cinderellas? And this always used to be a coward thing. Like, everyone talks about Cinderellas until you put 2 of them playing each other on a Saturday night in college football, and then no one watches. Like, people want to watch Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. Like, yeah, Indiana was a cool story until I watched them against Ohio State. I'm like, yeah, I don't need to see this again. Like, everyone loves that good undrafted free agent that ran for 100 yards. Like, yeah, I like the guy that was a top 5 pick. There was a blue chipper since college. That if you watched him at Penn State against Ohio State and against Michigan and all these teams, he looked like Walter Payton meets Barry Sanders. And sometimes, like any young human being, if you get put in the wrong situation, you can get lost. Well, now he's back. And it looks like he's on a fucking vengeance tour right now. Out for blood against every team he plays. And the cool part about Saquon is he's not angry about it. Like, some people are very spiteful. Some people are very petty, and that drives them. Like, I think we're all human beings kind of driven in different ways. Like, there are different buckets for all of us. I can be like that as well. I'm sure many people listening can, but I don't like that negative headspace. Like, I don't, it doesn't fuel me in the right direction. So I try to be driven by positivity and optimism. And I think Saquon, like watching him this season, feels like a very upbeat, positive, not holding any ill will against the Giants. Even this week, Daniel Jones kicked to the curb like all week. He's like, yeah, I've been reaching out. Hopefully he's doing okay. He's my guy. Instead of like, fuck them, they're losers, screw that organization. Like, he hasn't really taken that tactic. So I think this has been a huge year just on a national level for Saquon to be like, God, this guy's just this type people or the type human being that historically in this league, the type person that the league has built their, upon. These guys, super high level, elite player, needle mover, all-time great talent, and just awesome human being. So props to Howie for making that happen, and props to Saquon for choosing the Eagles because it's just a match made in heaven. Speaking of match made in heaven, it's funny when you become really good and things aren't going perfectly, but you're still having success. People love to nitpick you. And I think right now, when you look at the Chiefs, and really it's been like this all season. They set the bar so high that unless they win games by 20 or 30 points, people are going to be critical even when they win. Okay, the NFL season is rolling along and contenders are separating from the pack. But one thing hasn't changed, baby. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Listen, whether it's fades in the corner of the end zone, running backs breaking big 60-yard runs, we don't care. We just want to bet touchdowns, and DraftKings is the place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something as simple like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your first pick. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. I just wanted to take a step back because in the Patrick Mahomes era, I think we underestimate, or at least the way it's contextualized and the way we speak about it, it's almost underrated. When he began starting in 2018, one, they have been to every conference championship game on his watch. Obviously, in 6 of those seasons, or 4 out of those 6, they have gone to the Super Bowl. 3 of them they've won. In 18, they were 12-4. In 19, they were 12-4. In 20, they were 14-2. In 21, they were 12-5. 2 years ago, they were 14-3. And last year was a disaster at 11-6. And obviously, they still won the Super Bowl. And this season, everyone's had an opinion. What's up with the Chiefs? Is this their downfall? What are they doing? They're 10-1. And Andy Reid said something today in the locker room that I thought, sometimes we overcomplicate this. Because I love talking about free agency. I love talking about the draft. I love talking about how organizations do this and how organizations do that. The #1 goal, if you're a head coach, if you're the starting quarterback, if you're the GM, it's just to win games. Doesn't matter what Mel Kiper gave you draft grade back in April. It doesn't matter if people thought your free agents were good. It doesn't matter our opinions on you over under in training camp. When we're in the middle of November, what's your record? And they go, we're 10-1. We've played 11 games and we've lost 1 of them. It's like, well, they've come close here and they could have lost this game. Yeah, but we didn't. And unlike a lot of these teams, check our fucking resume. And listen, do I think the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl? I actually don't. I would not bet on them. Just the law of averages. If you play in all these crazy games, you're bound to lose a weird game in the playoffs. I watched a lot of the Patriots dynasty, and they lost some years. Hell, they lost in the second round some years. I vividly remember when Bart Scott and Rex Ryan beat them. And it was a really, really big deal at the time, because it was. But sometimes it happens. You don't win. That's why no team's ever won 3 straight Super Bowls. Hell, it's really rare for a team to win back-to-back. Chiefs did it for the first time since the Patriots in the early 2000s. But can't we just acknowledge, this run that they're on is kind of historic? And you do stuff like this, even if you lose in the conference championship this year to the Bills, let's say. That's just adding more pelts to the wall of this incredible dynasty that they're on. So, one, if you're a Chiefs fan, it doesn't get any better than this. This is as good as it gets. And also, like Andy said in the locker room today after they barely squeaked by beating the Panthers, you get every team's best shot. And any team that isn't good, you're definitely their Super Bowl. And on the road, after a big game in Buffalo, one, the Chiefs were up 27-19 late in this game. So it's not like they had to come storming back. They were in full control. Bryce made some plays. They tied the game. Got a 2-point conversion. It was impressive. And then Chiefs went right down the field. Not once in my mind did I think they're going to lose. Not once in my mind when they got it back with enough time on the clock did I think they're not going to get in Super Bowl range. It's a very rare group of guys that you go, they're going to figure this out. They're going to make it happen. It's like game's on the line and you're down 2 and Steph's shooting a 3, you think it's going in. When I was a kid and Tiger Woods was in the mix, he's going to find a way to win. That's how I think about the Chiefs. Is it the prettiest thing? No, it's not. But what the run that they're on, 2018 to present, there was a LinkedIn page, is absolutely incredible. I saw this headline on Bleacher Report on Twitter that said, since September, Bo Nix has 16 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. A lot of people, when I buried Miami a couple weeks ago, Miami Dolphins fans think they still have a really good chance to make the playoffs. I think they're a loss this Thursday away from it basically being over. It could be like Denver is a win away and you're a loss away and you play the Packers this week, which is going to be very difficult. Like, it's just a mathematical equation here. You'd have 5 wins. They'd have 8. And I'm just betting on them getting to 10, especially when I look at their schedule. I'm betting against you doing it. And Denver, whose over-under coming into the season was 5.5, now looks like it's going to be a massive upset if they don't play a playoff game. Do I think they're going to win a playoff game? Probably not. It's difficult. But anytime your defense is that good and your quarterback is clearly playing with a lot of confidence, they're going to have a chance. And I mentioned this to Coward earlier tonight. You know what we can say about the Russell Wilson, Sean Payton divorce? Their personalities were never meant for each other. One, they were like, I guess they weren't set up on a blind date because Sean Payton knew what he was signing up for. But if you had followed Sean Payton's career, I would say a pretty cocky, high belief in himself. Some might say that he thinks he invented football and could be just pretty aggressive. And Russell Wilson, this listen, I think I don't even think it's fake anymore. I just think it's who he is. I think he's like a robot, a very optimistic, positive robot that turns off people like Sean Payton or just, I don't know, normal people like myself, kind of off, and be the type of person that I could only be around so much. But when you're the coordinator / play caller head coach, you're going to spend a lot of time around that guy. And then his skill set didn't mesh up with what Sean Payton wants in a quarterback. It was never going to work. He did not want to coach him, but he could not turn down the $90 million. And he knew if he got enough juice, he could make that divorce happen, and he did. And he was right to do it. Because I don't think the Broncos would be as good if they were forced to keep playing offense with Russell Wilson. Just like Russell Wilson got granted going to Mike Tomlin, who probably falls much closer under his category of just getting along with their sayings. I guess Tomlin can just deal with Russell's, daily optimism. But mainly, his skill set fits the Steelers. Can throw bombs. It works. And it's just worked for both. It's one of the rare times. Sometimes it's you just break up, cut a player, and it's a disaster. Your team sucks. That guy goes on and struggles. It's the complete opposite. Sean Payton and Bo Nix are going to the playoffs. The Steelers and Russell Wilson are going to the playoffs. It's one of those rare win-wins. Can I tell you about my new friends? No Days Wasted. The holiday season, means going to parties, hanging out with the boys, having a few cocktails, watching the game, picking it with some old friends. So be ready to celebrate and bounce back the next day with DHM Detox, the ultimate vitamin for when drinking. It's a science-backed, functional herbal supplement loaded with antioxidants and liver-supporting ingredients. You just take these 2 capsules right after a few drinks. And DHM Detox gets to work so you can wake up feeling fresh for kickoff. No Days Wasted is running the biggest sale of the year for Black Friday. Get 30% off all orders this week. Stock up now for the holiday season and your next game day celebration. The Detox supports your body's natural response to drinking by helping break down the toxins so you don't feel sluggish the next day. How awesome is that? Don't love it? No Days Wasted offers a full refund on your first order of a 15-pack. No questions asked. Don't waste time feeling sluggish after a night out. It's a completely risk-free purchase. Feel great or your money back on your first order. Head over to nodayswasted.com/3andout and use code 3andout. That's number 3, ANDOUT, to get 30% off your order. That's nodayswasted/3andout for 30% off and free shipping. Speaking of win-win-win, the NFC North, the Lions, what's crazy about their season is they feel like they're the best team in the NFL by a wide margin. They're going to win the Super Bowl, and it's not even going to be close. Yet they're not even a lock to win their own division. The Minnesota Vikings are 9-2. They are having the quietest 9-2 season probably in the history of the NFL. And the Packers, I'm not going to put too much stock into today, but they clearly have a lot of good players. And when healthy on offense, that thing is very, very potent. And that's a real team. That's a team that can make serious noise in the playoffs. It's crazy how top-heavy that division is. And all three of those teams, the Lions can't pull their foot off the pedal because they got those two teams right on their ass. And it's just, it's wild. I mean, I thought the division was going to be good coming into the season. I thought Sam Darnold would work in Minnesota. I never in a million years thought they would be 9-2. For as awesome as the Lions season has gone, they were right there with the 49ers last year. They were in the NFC Championship. I do think you could argue it's been way crazier what Minnesota has done than either Green Bay or even Detroit, which is having, I think I saw today, the greatest season in the history of the franchise so far. But the head scratcher to a lot of people is Washington. And I think this is pretty simple. Their team was never that good. What they were doing early in the season was a testament to Dan Quinn and the coaching staff. They don't have that much talent. Now, you can say the quarterback has regressed. Obviously, if you watch Caleb today, he looked dramatically better than Jayden. If you watch Bo Nix today, he looks better than Jayden. Though Jayden still made a bunch of good plays with his legs and still looks like a good player, just threw a couple bad picks. But if Washington goes 9-8, it'll feel, if you're a Washington fan, a big kick in the nuts because at one point in time you were 7-2. But I do think 9-8 would feel like what your team represents. And everyone is going to be all over Kingsbury, and Colin was asking me about it. I see everyone writing about it on social. I've been very critical of Kingsbury over the years. His offense is not my style. Fundamentally, wouldn't be my type hire if I was an owner or a GM. Always heard he's a great guy, son of a Marine. Heard he's in the fucking facility at 4:30. He's not some pretty boy lazy guy. I mean, technically he's a pretty boy, but he's not. That's not the way he operates and lives his coaching career. Dude's a grinder. Offensively, he just comes from the Mike Leach tree, which is cool, but it's not what I would want in the NFL. I'm not putting this on him. Their team just isn't that good. They just don't have that much firepower. They've hit some freak plays, obviously the Hail Mary, and even today against Terry McLaurin. You go, God, why didn't Dallas kick their, how did they not beat Dallas' ass? I'm watching today, Dallas got some good players too. I don't think the gap between those two teams, honestly, is that crazy wide. And the other thing is, everyone's writing Mike McCarthy off. Listen, this is not the NBA. You don't just punt on the season. You still try. Mike McCarthy's won a lot of games for a long time. Kind of knows what he's doing. And listen, Mike Zimmer's had a rough year. Check his resume. It's not bad either. These divisional games are just difficult. The Houston Texans today lost to the Titans. I looked at the box score of that game. Will Levis was sacked 8 times and threw a pick 6 and you lost. If you told me before the game that Will Levis would be sacked 8 times and throw a pick 6, what the final score would be, I would say Texans 40, Titans 12. So to lose that game, oof. But it just, even the Broncos and the Raider game was relatively close. These divisional games in November and December are just tightly contested. These teams are very, very comfortable against each other. Not only are you used to playing the individual opponent, like if I'm the left tackle, I know the pass rusher, or I'm the wide receiver, I know the corner. You just see them on film all the time. Because when you're playing your other divisional opponents, what games do you think you study? You just probably see, I would say, I don't know, 200 to 300% more of that opponent if you're on a team for 3 or 4 years than you do of every other team in the league. Once the season starts, you're just constantly seeing those players. So there's a comfortability also going to the stadium, away game. Like Dallas has been going there. If you're CeeDee Lamb, if you're Micah Parsons, if you're Cooper Rush. And that's what I respect about Dallas because, the 49ers got their ass kicked today against the Packers. And this is obviously the season from hell. And this is what I said about the Chiefs. Everyone's like, well, the Niners just ran out of gas. They just had enough. Well, why would the Chiefs just run out of gas? They've been going to conference championship games since 2018 when they lost to Brady and Belichick. Remember those guys? Tom Brady's now been retired for 2 years and working in TV after he went to Tampa for 3. So why aren't they running out of gas? They're 10-1. The Niners just got old. Well, Chiefs aren't young. And I just think it's easy to make excuses. Maybe they just invested in the wrong players. Spent a lot of money on Deebo Samuel. He's been terrible. Christian McCaffrey isn't even the best running back on the team right now. Obviously, they've had a million injuries, but Chiefs have had injuries. They find a way. They figure it out. The excuses are like this notion that they're just running out of gas because they've been in the playoffs. Like, I don't know. The Chiefs have been fucking making runs for a lot longer than the 49ers have. And in 2020, they didn't take off the season. They were actually in the Super Bowl that year where the Niners didn't sniff the playoffs. Picture this. You're in the garage, your favorite room in the house. You're tuning up your engine with parts you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease. And because you're committed to driving that thing further than the odometer can even handle, you start thinking to yourself, you know what? I could probably also use some new brakes, some shocks, and struts. This baby deserves a new air filter. So where do you go next? Back to eBay. You can find anything there. It's unreal. Wipers, headlights, even cold air intakes. It's all there. And you've got an eBay guaranteed fit. You order a part, and if it doesn't fit, send it back. Simple as that. Look, DIY fixes can be major. Doesn't matter if it's just maintenance or a major mod. You got it, especially when things are guaranteed to fit. So when you dive into your next car project, start with eBay. All the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. The Giants. There's so many different angles here. I saw Albert Breer say no one will ever do offseason Hard Knocks again. I don't know if it's like in-season Hard Knocks where you don't really have a choice. Like if you fall into the categories, they can give it to you and you can't really get out of it. Obviously, if you make the playoffs, you can't avoid it. But I think when you look at the Giants, their season couldn't be going any worse. And this week, it felt like it jumped the shark a little bit. The Jets, when you get weird stories coming out of New York, like that's been happening for a long time. Today, it was like Aaron Rodgers won't let them take an MRI. Well, yeah, he doesn't trust anyone in that building. That building is just whack job central, or at least it had been. My guy Phil Savage is in control now. I think he'll get the train back on the tracks. But clearly, it's just a weird environment there. People start getting fired. You don't know who to trust. I actually kind of understand it. Now, Aaron signed up for that, but all these stories coming out of New York, it's kind of easy to be like, did Joe Douglas leak this? Did Woody leak this? It's getting weird. The Giants are just like, yeah, we're benching Daniel Jones. Not that weird. Guys that get paid a lot of money who underachieve get benched constantly. We saw Derek Carr get that treatment. We saw Russell Wilson, who's, one of the greatest players in the history of his former franchise, get benched a year and a half into Denver. So Daniel Jones getting benched wasn't that weird. It was a bad contract. But then when they went to Tommy Cutlets over Drew Lock after they had paid him $5 million to be the backup, you started going, what are we doing here? This is not 1992 or 1986. Selling tickets and positive vibes and good stories on the back of the post. Who gives a shit? You're guaranteed $400 million in 2025 from the television deal. You are going to be a positive when it comes to profit, no matter what. And a couple touchdowns from some Italian kid that played at Syracuse that had a couple moments last year that honestly cost you Jayden Daniels and Drake May is not going to mean shit in the grand scheme of things. But why would you start him other than that? Is John Mara still obsessed with what they're saying about him on WFAN and what is being written about him in the newspapers? Hey, John, I would say the majority of your audience under 50 years old that follows your football team hasn't picked up one of those papers in years. Ultimately, a conversation from a media guy in New York because they are Italian and Tommy Cutlets throws a touchdown isn't going to mean a goddamn thing. But there's no other way to justify or to rationalize why they would start him over Drew Lock if you went, they just wanted to get some positive pub. They were hoping he would have some moments and people would like it like they did last year. And that to me is something the Jets would have done. And forever there was a clear line between the Giants and the Jets. And listen, when I worked for the Eagles and we played the Giants, when you would play them, it was like, this is just a high level operation. The way the team looked, I remember them being huge. Their defensive line was massive. Their offensive line was just a bunch of badasses. Obviously, they had Eli, Tom Coughlin, Jerry Reese was their GM. They were just an impressive operation. And the moment Tom Coughlin got fired, and obviously I'm not saying that they shouldn't have fired him, it was time. They have kind of become the Jets. And you see these things happen and you go, does John Mara get a little bit of a pass because he has perfectly fitted pants and he's kind of tall and skinny and he kind of looks like a guy that easily could have been a senator from New York? And Woody Johnson, because they were both born into this. It's not like either of them are self-made men. But Woody feels a little bit more like a wild card and a guy that like, yeah, he's just all over the map. And every story that comes out about him that has him meeting with his coordinators and, you know, his general manager, and there's 7 people lined up next to him that you've never heard of them. That are like, yeah, that's Woody's cronies. And it's just like, oh, just John Mara walking around the organization. And listen, you saw it in Hard Knocks. Seems like a nice guy. Seems like a guy. Doesn't seem as crazy as Woody Johnson flying in on a helicopter to fire Joe Douglas, as Jay Glazer reported. Yet the actions in this organization feel to parallel the Jets. And whenever I hear these older people talk about, like, you know, the league's going to get involved, the league's going to do this, they want the Jets and the Giants to win. The league is better when the Raiders are good. I got news for you. It's all bullshit. The league has never had more people watching. And the Giants haven't been good now in almost a decade. The league is better when the Raiders are relevant. That's bullshit. Because for 20 plus years of the internet age, the NFL has never made more money, and the Raiders have played in like one important game over that entire period of time. So if you suck now and you're a big market, a small market, an any market, you just don't matter. But I never in a million years would have thought the Giants would stoop to the level of Tommy Cutlets over Drew Lock. Why? Because he's from the area and people like him. Well, is he the best quarterback? And when you saw all these players on the team being mad over Daniel Jones, I actually think it represented more that we're just a joke now. Because Drew Lock, who, listen, has played in the league for a while, and I'm not acting like he's Joe Montana, but you paid him $5 million to be the backup. And he'd literally been the backup all season long. So are we all just part of the circus now? Is that what this is? And that's where you get performances like today, where the team's just like, fuck it, we don't care. This is so stupid. And I think there's a level of that with the Jets. All I hear and all I see is like Sauce Gardner. What happened to Sauce Gardner? Well, you do realize that most players, just like most human beings, aren't leaders. They're not Moses parting the sea with everyone following them. They're not Peyton Manning walking into practice like, motherfuckers, follow my lead. Most of us follow. Successful people are following. And Sauce looks around like, who do I follow? Well, there's no one. So what happens? He falls off a cliff. And you see the Giants today, like everyone's kind of looking around. What do we do? And no one has any answers. And it's pretty sad. Sometimes you lose. Like the Commanders today. They lost. They got beat. Turbin had a great play. Cooper Rush made some plays. Parsons was making some plays. Like, it's the NFL. It's difficult. If the Chiefs had lost today, it would have been a big headline, but it's like, yes, the NFL. If the Panthers win 4 or 5 games, like they're going to beat a good team or two. It was at home, in Carolina. Like, it's not that crazy. It's football. It is difficult. If you do not come to play, you will lose. If you're a step slow, I saw with the 49ers. They missed 10 tackles in the first quarter. So you're just a little hesitant, and all of a sudden it snowballs and you start getting worked. But what's going on with the Giants right now, it's pretty embarrassing, honestly. It's just a lover of football, as a lover of like the NFL and what certain things stand for. That's not the team that when I lived in the Northeast that I have any recollection of being like that. Like Tommy Cutlets, like what the fuck are we doing? If I was a Giants fan, I would be furious. And there's a difference. Like, it's not about Daniel Jones. It's about what is going on right now with our franchise and who can help us. Because, John, you fired Tom Coughlin, and ever since then, it's been the same shit year after year after year. And all I ever hear anyone is like, well, Jets' problem starts with Woody. Well, don't we have to say then the Giants' problem starts with John Mara? A couple other quick things. Deion has had a remarkable season. He got worked by Kansas. And Kansas, like Florida, are like two of the hottest teams in the college football. The crazy thing is if Arizona State beats Arizona this week, which they should easily, that Deion Sanders won't even be the coach of the year in his own conference. Kenny Dillingham went to Arizona State, which was equally as shitty a couple years ago as Colorado. And unlike Prime, and I'm not blaming Prime, his son's a top pick in the NFL. His guy, Travis Hunter, might be the second pick in the NFL draft. Like, he has two of, if not the two, best players in college football on his team. Kenny Dillingham's star offensive player is like a white running back from Sac State, who's actually pretty good. But, like, it ain't the same. And it's going to be crazy when it happens because a lot of people are going to be like, wait, what? If they win next week and Colorado does not make it to the Big 12 championship, Kenny Dillingham is going to be the coach of the year in the Big 12, not Deion Sanders. So I wouldn't have seen that coming. Arizona State, and Deion's done a great job this year. If they win this last week and are 9-3, remarkable. But a lot of people, even if you didn't think they'd be this, thought that, be 6-7 wins. I probably thought 5 or 6. Everybody picked Arizona State to be dead last in the Big 12. And this is why with the transfer portal, it is so hard to figure out college football. I was thinking about this watching some of these, depending on what game you were watching, it was senior day. So on senior day, a lot of the coaches, right, before the game starts, stand out there and basically hug, and the player comes up, the senior, with his family, with his girlfriend, with his brothers and sisters. It's a cool moment. And I was thinking, like, how many dudes now go up to their coach and, like, they just met him 6 months ago. They barely know the guy. Where in the history of college football, if you were a senior at a program, or even like Quinn Ewers at Texas, who participated in a senior day because he's going to go to the pros, You've been in that program at minimum for several years. So you're watching all these college programs all over Saturday lose. The turnover in these programs it's unprecedented. It's never happened. So to just be shocked when some of these ranked teams lose, I think it's a little disingenuous the way we talk about it. This is not 2014. So when so and so team, Ole Miss, loses to Florida, they haven't had the same core for 4 straight years. When whatever team loses in a big upset, like they have a lot of new players. And that's not just freshmen. That's guys that were literally all over the country. So I actually think what we just witnessed on Saturday night with Alabama losing, Ole Miss losing, Texas A&M losing, obviously Indiana getting worked, which is a separate conversation from this, is going to be something we need to get used to. And the other thing is, Indiana got worked. Indiana in the second half got absolutely curb stomped. Like that was JV versus varsity. That was not a fair fight. Now, if these other teams hadn't lost, I was 100% fine with them missing the playoffs. Now they're going to get in because they're only going to have one loss. But in college football, we do have to acknowledge some teams getting to 10 or 11 wins, their path is dramatically easier than the other. I'm not from the South. I don't care about SEC football, like in terms of deep in my soul, I have a bias for them. I just watch the sport. And I've been watching college football religiously and really for a living now for a long time, for 15 plus years. And if you have eyes and you spend any time on Saturdays in the fall, you will see that the way better players, especially on defense, play in the SEC. And the tougher road environments are in the SEC. So when I see Alabama lose at Oklahoma or A&M lose at Auburn, their records don't mean that much to me. Because I watch the players that those programs have on defense. I go, God, those look like a bunch of NFL guys. Their speed is a lot faster than when I watch Wisconsin or Indiana or Rutgers or Maryland. It looks like a different sport. And listen, if it wasn't for Oregon being part of the package, the Big Ten would be an embarrassment this year. Obviously, Ohio State's good. They're good every year. We saw Penn State. They can't win a big game to save their life. And honestly, they should have lost to Minnesota. So these people arguing, and I see Danny Cannell and Joel Klatt. The SEC is the best conference. And honestly, I don't even think it's that close. I think there's a pretty wide gap. And obviously, if you're determining the 12 teams that are going to make the playoffs, your record and whether you won or lost the game matters. But there are a lot of teams with 6 or 7 wins in the Southeastern Conference that if you flip conferences, I think would have a way better record. If you put Indiana this year in the SEC, I think best case they win 7 games. That I was blown away. I was rooting for them. I wanted to see them have success against Ohio State. And after that first drive, it was kind of a joke. And once the punter missed that snap, it was on like Donkey Kong. And that second half looked like Ohio State, what they do to all the shitty programs in the Big Ten, which this year happens to be a large percentage of them. Have a good night. Have a good day whenever you're watching this, and we'll see you tomorrow.